Welcome back, honors. This is where we left off in class today, right? So I think we started talking about Homer a little bit and how he's apparently the only account that we have of the Greek Dark Ages. So many things to be said about Greece, right? So many things to be said about ancient Greece. So many things to be said about how they literally are the foundation of every other Western civilization that has ever existed in the history of everything, and how their progression through time is seriously like a progression of all world history, and how there's rises and falls and dark ages and blah 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 blah, blah. All kinds of stuff. So, couple things though. When we talked about Mesopotamia, what was one of the big, what was the big story, the big epic poem, the big thing, the big thing that came out? Good job, Claire. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Um, Really considerable thing though about the Epic of Gilgamesh. The very first time it came out, it was actually written down, and it was written about 3,000 years before this. So the Trojan War was on an account by Homer in his story called the Iliad, and it's the Mycenaeans who went to war with Troy because Troy was controlling. Well, so the myth goes that the prince of Troy, and his name was Paris, that he went to Mycenae and he actually stole this girl, Helen of Troy, blah 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 blah. Like he did all this stuff and took her back to Troy, and that Agamemnon and his associate were really upset about it and brought Achilles to the gates of Troy, and they stormed Troy for several days and they couldn't get in. And so what they decided to do is they built this big what? Exactly. Oh, they built this big horse and they just went on in there and they waited until they got drunk. Blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you that whole part of the story in a second. So in real life, though, what actually more than likely happened is that Troy began to like control trade routes from Russia to Greece, and the Mycenaeans are going to actually get very, very upset about that because they're taxing their vessels unfairly, and the Mycenaeans are going to win by burning down the city of Troy. No big deal. And then the Iliad itself came out about 500 years later, and the story itself was told by a blind Greek poet by the name of Homer, who couldn't write, who couldn't read. He just told all stories through word of mouth. Really quick, red flag. What's the number one red flag in what I just said? Good job, Olivia. Like the fact that no one ever actually wrote it down. Because why is that a problem? Catherine, I heard you. You got too excited. I need you to calm down a little bit. The main reason why it's a big red flag is simply because you can't trust it. Written records are 10 times as more accurate as oral records, right? They're just more accurate in general. Now, really a cool other interesting fact is that Homer may have never even been a real person for all we know, because this again, Homer telling a story, someone told a story about Homer telling a story. So, I know, Lauren, it's ridiculous, isn't it, that some people these days. So, Homer told the story of the Trojan War and this thing called the Iliad, but it's probably not exactly how it happened. There is no historical evidence of this thing, the Trojan horse. It just kind of goes against a lot of logic that it ever existed, considering how large it was and the fact that it was able to carry several hundred different men inside of it, and that the Trojans just openly accepted this giant wooden horse into their door. I'm really going to be honest. If somebody showed up with a big wooden horse in my house, I think I might ask for a gift receipt. So, but probably didn't happen that way. And so several replicas have been made of it. But they also, the really cool thing about it is that actually this is just a story that's lasted for over 3,000 years. That's pretty awesome, right? And just kind of think about that for a second. Like really, really like wrap your mind around the fact that this story has been around for that long, and it's a common one that most people know about. So the Mycenaeans are going to be driven out of their home by these people called the Dorians, okay? Now, the Dorians are what Romans would call barbarians. The Dorians are going to begin to call themselves Hellenes, though. In English, that means Greek. So the Mycenaeans actually were never the first Greeks. The Minoans weren't actually the first Greeks. The first Greeks were a bunch of Roman band of barbarians that drank mead out of horns and were like, So, and they actually destroyed the Mycenaeans and took control of Peloponnese, the coastline, and all of the islands that actually went off of Greece, including Crete. So, the Dark Ages, though, are going to come upon them. What happens? What is a Dark Age, do you think? Does anybody want to answer that question? Good job, Cassandra. A Dark Age is actually a time of very limited learning. It's a time of, it's where literally society takes a giant step backward. Somebody tell me something that probably doesn't exist in a Dark Age. Good job, Karina. Art doesn't exist in a Dark Age, right? What else probably doesn't exist in a Dark Age? Good job, Amy. Like stories, written records, all of these things don't exist in Dark Ages. So this is why we can't believe that Homer was ever real. So the only record we have of the Dark Ages is actually of this blind poet named Homer. Now, the funny thing about it is, what if he actually was real and we're sitting there making fun of him and he's like looking at us right now like, of course I was around. Now, he wrote the Iliad and he is also the father of modern day literature. His stories, and of course the Odyssey is one of his stories as well. The Odyssey, of course, is the story of Odysseus following the Trojan War after he was like held on an island by this thing called Calypso, and then it's about him and his men trying to get back to his wife, and then there's all these dudes that are trying to mac on her and all this other stuff. It's a story you'll talk about one day with D'Antonio, and it's a really, really good one, I promise. But he wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad. Remember that. They're really, really good examples of modern literature because they have a central figure of a hero, his rise, his challenge, and then his return home. So we'll talk about a lot more stuff like that kind of when we talk about revolutions as well. But here we go again, right? The people had to create a brand new civilization, and they had to begin herding and farming all over again. So Sparta and Athens are going to rise out of the ashes to start the Archaic period of Greece. So I'm going to do some magic real quick. Y'all ready for this? Legit, right? All right, so anyway, the Archaic period is going to begin following the Dark Ages. Now, the Archaic period is a very shambly-like moment. It's just like all over the place. And geography, of course, is going to shake Greece. We talked about all this stuff, so please don't write it down again. But it's a part of the Balkan Peninsula right here. The large chunk right here is called Peloponnese, and then Crete and several islands come off of it. So separated the city, it's very, very mountainous. We talked about this as well. Separate all the city-states, leading to very unique cultures. If you don't have this written down yet, I would go ahead and copy it down real fast. So the mountains separated all of the city-states. Now, this is a thing. Can you write this down? If you don't already have this, or you don't already know this, or if we already talked about it in class and I forgot, I apologize. But it's called geographic isolationism. Now, geographic isolationism actually leads to very unique cultures. And cultures of the East and Asiatic cultures are very, very unique because of this concept, and that's because they were separated by large mountain ranges or large bodies of water or other things like that. Continuing forward, though, it extends into the Mediterranean Sea and is also next to the Aegean Sea, and Greece is also made up of hundreds of small islands and a bunch of other stuff. We talked about this already. So, the sea provided a vital link for trade, which is eventually also going to bring the city-states into contact with one another. What is all... Okay, I heard you. Yes, cultural diffusion. I love it too. Don't get me wrong. So, speaking of that, what did they trade? What do you think Archaic Greece traded? There was three main things that Archaic Greeks traded. I'm hearing a lot of shouting, a lot of people freaking out. Dalton, no, calm down. They didn't have any of the stuff you're saying. Weirdo. All right, anyway, Caesar salad. That's from Rome, dummy. Now, anyway, so the Archaic Greeks traded three big things: olive oil, wine, and marble. Real fun fact also, Caesar salad's not actually even Italian, and it's not even related to Julius Caesar. I'm just messing with Dalton a little bit. So, olive oil, wine, and marble. So, mainly they traded these things because they're three very naturally occurring things in Greece. Olive oil, of course, is used for several different things, but back in the day during Archaic Greece, it was also used to preserve food, health and beauty products, cosmetics, general health, cooking, and like all kinds of stuff. It's the base for a lot of different items as well. And then, of course, grapes make wine. They traded that. And also another big thing was marble. Now, they didn't use marble simply for art. They also used marble for massive construction projects, pillars. The Parthenon is built completely out of marble. Statues of the Greek gods and goddesses are built completely out of marble. Well, that's me going back into art. It was used for construction as well. Does anybody know how ancient Greeks actually chipped it off? Extra credit opportunity. If somebody can go find out how the ancient Greeks actually harvested their marble, mad extra credit for whoever comes and tells me first. There you go. Challenge accepted, right? So the Greeks also began to actually coin their own money. And they actually adopted this idea from the Persians because the Persians under King Darius I and Cyrus the Great started actually coining their own money. Also, the Greeks are going to develop their very own alphabet, and it was based off the Phoenician alphabet. And then the Romans are going to trade with, or the Etruscans actually are going to trade with the Greeks, and they're going to take that alphabet and they're going to turn it into their alphabet, and that's going to be the alphabet we use today. So, due to the Greeks and their trade with the Phoenicians and their trade with the Etruscans and their trade with the Romans, actually developed the modern day alphabet that we use now. Also, the Archaic period also gave way to the very, very first Olympics, okay? The prize for winning the Olympics back in the day, though, was only one thing: pride and immortality. You actually didn't win anything, and you also had to perform the Olympics stark naked. So, a lot of people that actually believe that this was due to the fact that the Olympics were not only as a sports ritual, they were also a religious ceremony, and that the Greeks considered the human body to be one of the most beautiful thing that the world had ever constructed. Sorry, I think one of the dogs is pawing at the door. So governing the city-states was also really, really important because every city-state was set up in a very, very similar, eerily similar way. So each Greek city-state is actually called a polis. Hold on one second. Sorry, somebody was very, very upset that he wasn't getting any attention. Hey, I love you too. So, each Greek city-state is called a polis. And each Greek city-state, how many parts do you think it had to it? How many parts did it have, Lufio? Can you speak? Can you sit? Can you speak? Speak. 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 Atta boy. So, anyway, he's right. There's two, okay? So, each Greek city-state was consisted of two parts. Now, there was the Acropolis, which is the high city that was actually built on top of a hill, and that contained all of the temples to the gods and goddesses. Then there was the walled lower city, which contained the agora. Not just the agora, though, okay? So the agora is actually the marketplace. It was the central focus of the walled lower city. It's on flatter ground, and it also contains several other things, though. It has the theater, public buildings, homes. It's where people go to school. It's where everything is... daily life occurs in the walled lower city, okay? So, oh no, you should shoot. Anyway. I know, I like Greek stuff too, buddy. Anyway. This is actually the Athens Acropolis. So remember, there's two different parts to a polis. There's the Acropolis up top, and then there's the lower city at the bottom, typically containing a wall for military purposes. Now, the very famous building that is on top of the Athens Acropolis, a lot of you actually still remember and know. Is what's it called again? Good job, Isabel. The Parthenon. And the Parthenon is the modern-day influence for a lot of architecture that exists in the United States. The Lincoln Memorial, the White House, the Lincoln Memorial. So, other stuff. Anyway. This actually is the remnants of the walled lower city from Athens as well. So it's still around, and as you can see, their architecture was actually pretty far advanced for their needs. Now, you'll notice that I'm not talking about what other city-state. Good job, Alejandro. I'm not talking about Sparta yet, because we're not really quite there, and also a lot of their records weren't kept nearly as well as those of the Athenians. This is what we believed that Athens looked like in its heyday. Not very big, but all things considered still very large. Now remember, if it's a city-state, it includes the political area right here, but also the surrounding towns and villages, okay? Because they're not farming on the inside of the walls. That would be ridiculous. But the marketplace was a very central location. It was the agora. It was an important gathering place. People met to debate, talk, trade, and even have festivals with the city's patron gods and goddesses. We'll talk about some other stuff like that too. I'm trying to just hurry up so I can actually get through I'm staying under 15 minutes. And there we go. We're going to stay under 15 minutes. So, we're going to go ahead. I know, you're a baby. We're going to go ahead and end there, right? And I'm going to check this on Thursday. We may or may not have a quiz on Thursday. I'm not really quite sure yet, but I'll let you know. I would expect one, just saying, based off of this flip and the other Greek stuff. Am I doing it? Yeah, cutie. All right, anyway, so I hope you all have a great evening. Have a good time at your PSAT. And if you haven't actually watched this until tomorrow, I hope you did well on your PSAT. We'll talk more about it, see how you felt about it, and then we'll continue forward with talking about Western civilizations and ancient Greece. So, look forward to seeing you then, Camden Catholic.